Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Imperial Guard Tactics video. Now before we get into the main video, I want to say a huge thank you to Simon Evans for sending in these absolutely beautiful pictures of his Armageddon Steel Legion. Simon is actually someone who I know in real life. He's one of the people that goes to the local wargaming club that I go to pretty much every Tuesday. And it was really interesting. I remember when I first met him, I just had this like instinctive suspicion that he'd been watching the Mordian Glory channel. Maybe it was the tact he was using, the unit choices he had, but I just sort of knew, and it was only until after, and I just had my Gene Stealer cut, but most of them were unpainted, and I hadn't really put many pictures on the channel. I think I had like the one picture of one of the painted neophytes on the channel. And it wasn't until afterwards that I think that sort of me and Simon both put two and two together, and we're like, oh yeah, oh by the way, you Mordian Glory, oh yeah, I thought you were. You've been watching my channel, yeah, totally. So it was quite interesting. But yeah, these models look absolutely fantastic, Simon. The last time I saw them, he didn't have all the chimeras, but I must say, buddy, they've absolutely come up absolutely perfectly. So that's awesome. Thank you for sending those pictures. Some of you should take a close look at some of the models that are available here, like the senior officer that's in the middle here. That's a really rare model, it's quite difficult to get hold of. So there's a better angle of him. So yeah, some absolutely beautiful images, and hopefully I'll see you down on Tuesday soon, Simon. Anyway, without further ado, let's crack on with the video. So over the last couple of weeks, I've been doing some sort of 101 tactics videos about different kinds of guard armies. So the first one we did was the Horde army. The second one we did was the mechanized army. Third one I'm going to be looking at is it's the third most common. I'm doing the three most common guard armies basically. The third most common is armoured lists. Now, even though I go on a lot about mechanized tactics and I go on a lot about infantry tactics, I have actually run in a fair number of games in 8th edition a proper armoured list. I mean, I own something like 13, 14 Leman Russes just for my Mordian Iron Guard alone. So I have plenty of armour. Maybe it's 10 and it's 4 with the Steel Legion ones. Bah, doesn't matter. I've got plenty of Leman Russes that I can draw upon when I'm doing my armoured lists. Now the key thing with armour is that in 8th edition it's really easy for tanks to get locked up. Okay, so screening is sort of the #1 weakness in an armoured list. But if you're going armoured, I mean you're going armoured, you're going all in 100%. You're going to take the minimum amount of infantry. You love the tanks, you want to collect a tank company. You're not interested in having any screens, or not any infantry screens. You see, sort of the way a lot of people would do it is that they would take some bare bones infantry squads and use them to screen out your main tanks. Yeah, that is good, but every sort of point you spend on an infantryman is one you're not spending on tanks, and you know, to get a decent infantry screen, you need at least 100 guys. Well, that's 400 points. Not to mention, you know, that's 400 points. So, that's like 2-3 Leman Russes. It's actually cuts into your armor quite significantly when you have an infantry screen. So one of the things that I would say, if you were to absolutely 100% dedicate, go into guard armor, the way you do it is you have to have sacrificial tanks. What I would say is you have to have screening tanks. And I sort of talked about this in a similar capacity in my mechanized video, where in a mechanized list your chimeras are often your screening units. You'll throw a chimera in the way of the enemy. You will charge a chimera into an enemy unit because you know the enemy will struggle to kill a chimera in close combat, and you don't care about losing one chimera, you've got 5 more. Similar sort of concept needs to be applied to an armoured an armoured army if you're going all tanks as many as possible. So the sort of screening tanks that you'll have, essentially there are two that you want to really consider. One is the Hellhound, either the Artima pattern or the from Forge World or the basic Hellhound from the Codex. And the second one is the Lehman Russ Fireball. Now both are very valid, but it's kind of how many points you want to spend with it. I would personally say that I would personally go for Hellhounds as my screening tanks because one, they're cheaper, and two, they are faster. And whether you move the problem with taking a Lehman Russ as a screening vehicle is, well, A, it only goes 10 inches, and B, there's always going to be that temptation, like, oh, I won't screen, I'll stay still because then I'll get maximum firepower for my main cannon, or I'll only move 5 inches so I'll get maximum firepower for my main cannon. And it's like, no, you've got to understand that if you're screening with that tank, you've screened it, you've already written it off. Okay, so for those of you that don't know what the Lehman Russ Fireball is, but it's just a Lehman Russ Punisher with 3 heavy flamers on it. It's quite expensive. It's going up to about 200 points because you've got basically 51 points for the 3 heavy flamers, plus 20 points for your main Punisher cannon. So you're looking at, that's 71 points plus 122. You're looking at 193 points. Hopefully my math is correct there. 193 points. That's almost 2 Hellhounds. Very almost 2 Hellhounds. And your 2 Hellhounds will be bringing you 4 heavy flamers. Well, more than that really. 2 heavy flamers and then 2 inferno cannons, which are like 2 heavy flamers each, but that's around 6. So that's about like having 6 heavy flamers. Basically, you can either choose between a Punisher cannon and 3 heavy flamers, or the equivalent of about 6 heavy flamers with 16-inch range on most of the shots. 4d6 inferno cannon, 2d6 whole heavy flamer. I would personally go for the Hellhounds. Okay, I would personally go for the Hellhounds. If I was to go, and the reason again for the Hellhounds is they have massive charge deterrent, because one, your opponent can't stay out of 9-inch range and try and charge you and not get Overwatch. He's going to get Overwatch by 2d6 Inferno Cannon shots. And 2, if he destroys your vehicle on a 4+, it explodes with a Hellhound. And that is really nasty. That is that's a 50-50 chance with a command reroll. That's a really good chance to do mortal wounds, and that's you don't want to be taking mortal wounds when you charge a Hellhound. Most of the time, the enemy's going to have to charge it with something that's quite beefy, something that's quite punchy. Maybe that's some kind of Thunderhammer Space Marine unit. The last thing they want to do is to have their Thunderhammers taking mortal wounds. There is not a lot of Feel No Pain out there in 8th edition. There are some factions which are completely based on it, obviously, like Death Guard. But outside of Death Guard, most armies have access to Feel No Pain, but it's relatively simple, like a 6-up Feel No Pain, or an ability to take Feel No Pain on a character. And I know I'll get some comments now going, there's Feel No Pain everywhere, blah blah blah. It's not as bad as it was in 7th edition, guys. Feel No Pain, it's just not as big a thing as it was in 7th edition. It was horrendous in 7th edition. Every army had it, basically, across everything. It was just, those armies that didn't have it were rubbish. So, basically, guys, how I would take an armoured list is, I would really, you want to get as many tanks as possible. Almost to the point where I'd be like, do you really want to be taking sponsons and stuff? Okay. Because you kind of want to be able to saturate the enemy with armoured targets. And if you take a basic Lehman Russ with just a battle cannon, for example, that's rocking you 144 points. Oh, my mistake. 152. You got to the heavy bolter. 152 points. Now you could take, you know, how I would do is I would take 8 of those. I would take that about 8 times. You know, I take it in squadrons, obviously. But that's 1,216 points. Maybe 8's a little much, but you are running an armoured list, so I'd definitely take 8. You're then going to want, you're going to want to be running these Lehman Russes in a, I should just say, in a spearhead detachment, so that they get the objective secured. By the way, Lehman Russes get objective secured when they're in a spearhead detachment. You then want to go ahead. I still think 8 might be a little much. I'm sort of spitballing the figures here, guys. We want to take about 7 or 8 Lehman Russes, and then you want to be taking, you know, 2 or 3 tank commanders as well. I'd say 2 tank commanders, and that's probably going to bring you to. You know what I'm going to say? I'm going to say you want to take 6 basic Lehman Russes and 2 tank commanders to have 8 Lehman Russes in total. That way, okay. So 152 times 6 plus 167 plus 167 plus 8 plus 8 plus 22 plus 22. So that's your 8 Lehman Russes right there, and that's a spearhead detachment, so they're all objective secured, and that's an extra command point, obviously. That's 1,306 points. Now, what you want to do is obviously have some Hellhounds in there, like we said. So realistically, you probably want about 4 or 5 Hellhounds. I'd say you probably want to go for about 4. Now, what you've got to ask yourself is, do you want to take the Armoured pattern ones, which are cheaper on Forge World, like 90 points or something, so you're saving 20 points, but you only get 2d6 pick the highest of the Armoured pattern, or do you go for the proper Codex one, where it's 110 points, but you you get more flames. It's up to you. It's basically a case of, are you going to take 4? You're going to take 4 normals or 5 Armoured patterns. That's basically what it comes down to. In my case, I would take 4 basic Hellhounds. Okay. Now what I do is I'd have 1 Lehman Russ tank commander. Pardon me. 1 Lehman Russ tank commander in the spearhead detachment with 6 other Lehman Russes, and I have 1 Lehman Russ tank commander in a outrider detachment leading the 4 Hellhounds. 2, you know, in those things, 1, and then 2 squadroned. In case people are wondering how am I beating the rule of 3, I'm using vehicle squadrons. Now that takes to 1,746 points. Now what's really important is you want to sort of be able to get some command points. Now, it's a tricky one this, but the way I would spend the last 250 points is I would take a Scion battalion. Okay? Or I would spend the remaining 250 points taking an infantry screen, but that kind of feels like I'm crumbling on the whole, just going armoured. I would take possibly I'd take a battalion with 3 squads of Scions with no upgrades, and then 2 Tempesters with, you know, like Command Rod or some shit. And that's you don't even really need Command Rod, to be honest. You only need Command Rod on one of them, and that gives you 1,981 points. That leaves you 19 points to spend on upgrades like Storm Bolters and shit. And the reason I'd take Scions is I would use them just as a little cheeky 200 point detachment, just over 200 points, and you just use them to either deep strike in and provide a little bit of support, or to deep strike in turn 3 and claim line breaker. That's all you want to use them for. The scions are just there to give you a little bit of distraction, a little bit of a line breaker. That's it really. So that's a full proper armoured list. Now there are some ways you could vary this. You could shift points around. You could and get yourself a couple of psychers, a couple of astropaths. I mean, if you took, rather than the scions, if instead you took 3, to get your battalion, to get extra command points, 3 squads of infantry, and then you took 2 Primaris psychers. I'm saying Primaris for a reason. Just it helps. There's no point in taking Ashpass. We can take Primaris for the HQ choices and save yourself some points. That actually brings you 1,946 points, and you want to use those Primaris basically to take Night Shroud as 1 power and Psychic Barrier as the other power, and that way you can boost your boost the defensiveness, the toughness of your vehicles. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is regiment traits. There are many good choices here. Okay, Cadian. Remember, you've only got 2 tank commanders, and remember, we've got 50 points. We've got about 50 points we've not spent, by the way, just roughly. There are 2. You could go Cadian, and you've got to remember you've only got 2 tank commanders, so for 6 Leman Russes, so you're not going to be issuing a load of orders. So the fact that if you go Cadian and your tanks stay still to get reroll 1s to hit, that's kind of like them all getting an order. Also, that gives you access to Pask, who you could take as one of the tank commanders, who's absolutely fantastic. You could go. I think he does 2 orders as well, so you'd be able to get 4 in total because you can use Inspired Tactics. So that's most of your Leman Russes ordered up, and you get overlapping fields of fire and all that kind of good stuff. And yeah, going Cadian would definitely be strong. The other option would be to go Kathachan, and considering we're basically spamming battle cannons, Kathachan would be absolutely amazing because you'd get to reroll all the and we're taking Kathachans and we're taking Leman and Hellhounds, which are all random weapons, which the Kathachan Doctrine affects all of that. You could also, with Kathachans, remember we've got about 50 points left over. You could probably afford to put a Hull Heavy Flamer on nearly every one of your tanks. I mean, it's basically, how much is for 17 points? It's 8, so it's 9 times. You might not quite be able to do it, but you could put Hull Heavy Flamers on some of your tanks, and then that would give you more Overwatch denial. Instead of heavy bolters, you're taking heavy flamers. It would give you some Overwatch stuff. The other one which would be interesting is Talon. Or Talon. Because you wouldn't have to worry about moving. But the reason I don't like Talon in my proposed list is because you've only got like hull heavy bolters on the Leman Russes. They're not a huge component of your firepower. Having the order get around them get around behind them is good, but I don't think Talon's as strong as a lot of people think it is, because on this configured list I've gone for, we're mostly about the battle cans, which aren't affected by your movement anyway. The last one that I would mention, Armageddon Steel Legion obviously is okay because you can ignore for -1, that's fine. Valhallan, it's going to be very difficult for the enemy to degrade you. I mean, one tactic a lot of people use against Guard is they just reduce your Leman Rust by a few wounds, and then it's hitting on -1, and then or hitting on 5+, and then it's kind of retarded and it's not doing as much damage. Valhallan would help reduce that. Although with your 50 points left over, we could just be taking a Tech Priest and be running around jury-rigging the tanks and healing them. The last one, which I think deserves a good mention, is Mordian. Okay. This army only has 4 Hellhounds to use as sort of screening exploding tanks. And yeah, we could drop another Lehman Russ and take another Hellhound and, you know, or another couple of Hellhounds maybe. You could shift it around. But taking Mordian and pairing your Lehman Russes up means that on Overwatch they're hitting on 5+s. That is a big deal. As Armageddon Legion, I use defensive gunners a lot on my tanks. And let me tell you, hitting on a 5+ is really important in Overwatch. Having an entire army of Lehman Russes that even when you get close to them, hit on 5-ups, and defensive gunners that hit on 4-ups, that would be absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. So, it's definitely worth thinking about the Mordian one. So there you go, guys. Bit of a long video, but armoured armies in 8th edition are a little complicated to use. Everyone knows without using infantry screens, they're a little complicated to use. So it's weird. Armoured lists used to be just this blunt tool which you just smash your opponent in the face with, and now, yeah, that is kind of true. But now with the fact that you can get tied up so easily, you have to have that finesse. You have to have that. It's quite tactical playing an armoured list. It's quite difficult. I'd say it's one of the most difficult lists to play. It's a tough one. Anyway, guys, hope you guys enjoyed this list. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.